Thank you so much, Laura, for the introduction, and to SOAS for hosting us on the 7th evening of Somali Week Festival. Despite the title of the festival it being a week, it's not over yet. There's still 2 more nights to go. But we're incredibly happy to be holding this specific event also at SOAS, the important launch of Harun Maruf's first book. The gentleman next to me needs no introduction, so I am not going to do him a disservice by even attempting it. But I think it was Laura on Twitter who referred to him as Mr. Breaking News. So that should give you an indication of the authoritative nature that Harun brings to the discussions on security and political issues in Somalia, having reported on Somalia for so many years now, and it culminating in this beautiful and interesting and fascinating book that we have in front of us, which he's going to tell us all about. And so please join me in warmly welcoming Harun Maruf to London to begin with. I have a very glorified role. I'm not going to be in conversation with Harun. My role really is to be timekeeping for you, to make sure that we get an opportunity for everyone to have their contribution. And Harun is going to start off first with a kind of a brief overview and background into what motivated him into writing the book, what the book is about, and then he'll be in conversation with you, the audience. The most important, I think, and most interesting aspect of the evening will be the discussions we're going to be having. So we'll have just short of an hour for that. So please, without further ado, Harun, tell us about this beautiful book that you're launching here today with us.
Thank you very much, Quman. I really appreciate you welcoming me here for the second time, and I always admire your knowledge for the issues. You probably studied well ahead of time. Congratulations and good job. I also would like to thank Somali Week Festival, who made this event and many other beautiful events very successful, and I congratulate them for the honorable noble job that they are doing for the Somalis wherever they are, on behalf of the Somalis. I would also like to thank SOAS and Laura Hammond. Thank you very much for hosting this event and for welcoming us. Before I go into the book, I would like to say also that whatever I say here is my own view, not the views of my employers. So I would rather be talking about breaking news maybe. But Al-Shabaab, Inside Al-Shabaab, the secret history of Al-Qaeda's most powerful ally, it's not the entire history of Al-Shabaab. It's not an academic book. I'm not an academic person. I'm a journalist. This is just a long article, and I hope you will have that in mind when you are asking me questions, and I hope you will be very kind with your questions. This book starts with the stories of 2 people. One of them is Ibrahim Haj Jama, also known as Ibrahim Afghan. The other one is a young man who you may have never heard of, although I have interviewed him once on radio, on VOA. His name is Asad Yere, or he's also known as Dalha Ali. His real name is Dalha Ali. I was only able to tell his real name after he died. I'll tell you how he died, but the name he gave me and the name he was known within Al-Shabaab was Asad Yere. One of them reflects Al-Shabaab's global ideology. That's Ibrahim Jama' Mi'ad. The other one reflects Al-Shabaab's internal ideology and why they have attracted so many young people in Somalia. So I'll start with Ibrahim. Ibrahim used to live in the same neighborhood that I live today outside Washington, D.C. in Virginia. He was a student. He was sent to the United States, by his parents. While he was there, he met a Palestinian jihadist. His name is Abdullah Azam. You might have heard his name before. Ibrahim Afghan was one of the young Somalis and other nationalities who were convinced to go to Afghanistan. In 1988, he went to Afghanistan. He participated in the Afghan war, and then he struck a commitment, a deal with Al-Qaeda to help them establish Al-Qaeda in Somalia. Abdullah Azam used to say to Ibrahim Haj Jama' Mi'ad, you are Mi'ad, and we have a promise with Mi'ad. Ibrahim Haj Jama' Mi'ad came back to Somalia in 1990, in August, I think, and he just did that. He was not the only one, but he was an ideologue. He was a scholar. He was a mentor, and he would become a mentor to many jihadists in Somalia, including Al-Shabaab. I believe he was the most important figure in the history of Al-Shabaab's early rise in Somalia. So Ibrahim set up the first training camp along with friends in Kismayo after Siad Barre left. That training camp trained hundreds of young Somali fighters. The story I'm telling you is not because Ibrahim Haji Jama' was the only one who had the idea of violent jihadism in Somalia. He was not the only one. I'm sure many other Somali scholars had the idea. But his views were so advanced that he organized that training. He succeeded to recruit hundreds of young Somali men, and afterwards, in the years that followed, Al-Qaeda always saw Somalia and Yemen as the future basis for Al-Qaeda leaders and for jihad and for global jihad. Ibrahim Afghan brought global jihad into Somalia. He was not the only one. He brought a number of other Al-Qaeda figures, including the current deputy leader of Al-Qaeda, Saif al-Adl, Hassan Saeed, Sheikh Yusuf al-Uyeri. All these were well-known global jihadists, and they came to Somalia. They helped previously a wing of Al-Ittihad al-Islam, not proper Al-Ittihad al-Islam, but an extremist wing of Al-Ittihad al-Islam. They trained them in Mogadishu, in houses in Mogadishu, and in Gadondawa, in Gedo. Later on, we know now that Al-Shabaab openly published videos admitting the role of Al-Qaeda, that Al-Qaeda has played the establishment of Al-Shabaab. When I say Al-Shabaab, I mean Al-Shabaab was established as an organization in 2006. But you have to remember that the members of youth who were involved in the awakening of Islam, the new movement of Salafi jihadists in Somalia, we always call it Shabab, the young man, even when Siad Barre was here. If you go to a mosque, the scholars would refer to young men who are activists who are working on Salafi jihadism. They would refer them as Shabab. So Shabab, the word is not new. It has existed for a long time, but Al-Shabaab, the organization, has been established in 2006 in Mogadishu. So Hassan Saeed, one of the key Al-Qaeda figures, said to establish and help Al-Shabaab and Somali jihadists was an order from Osama bin Laden, Ayman al-Zawahiri, Abdullah Azam, and others. Al-Shabaab, obviously, some of the Al-Shabaab leaders today has admitted that they were involved in attacking United States forces in 1993 during the battle with General Mohammed Farah Aidid. I'm sure General Mohammed Farah Aidid and his supporters didn't know that. I'm not associating Al-Qaeda fighters with General Mohammed Farah Aidid. General Mohammed Aidid was fighting for his own cause. But I'm sure that these figures have also exploited that situation and played their own part, not related to general ID's war. That's being documented. Al-Shabaab now spoke about it openly. Also, indictments against Al-Qaeda members by the United States proved that Al-Qaeda figures were involved. So the reason I'm talking about Al-Qaeda is that the phenomena that Al-Shabaab is using today is not a Somali phenomena, it's a global jihadist phenomena. And it was one that was helped and nurtured and mentored and supported by Al-Qaeda. The other figure I interview, and I start with my book, is the young man I already told you about. He defected from Al-Shabaab in 2009. He joined the new government led by Sheikh Sharif Sheikh Ahmed. But unlike Sheikh Sharif Sheikh Ahmed, he was Al-Shabaab. He was trained by Al-Shabaab, and the reason he has joined Al-Shabaab was he was a student in a school, high school in Mogadishu, but he was attracted, mesmerized by the rise of the Islamic courts. He was mesmerized by the fight against the warlords who ravaged the country, who held the country hostage for such a long time. He wanted to get rid of them. And while he was so encouraged to fight against the warlords, Ethiopia entered Somalia. And that was the last thing for him. He joined Al-Shabaab. He went to a base that Al-Shabaab, not a base that Al-Shabaab ran, but an Islamic court. The Islamic court sent him to a training run by Adan Hasha'iro. So Adan Hasha'iro trained him. He became a brilliant fighter, if I may use that word. He was an assassin. He was a logistic officer. In 1 month, he might ambush an Ethiopian convoy. He might carry out a number of assassinations. He would transfer logistics. He was so intelligent. When I interviewed him, I interviewed him when he defected Al-Shabaab, and he told me that he doesn't see a future for himself. I told his story. I shared his story with you. I aired that story, very short story of him on VOA radio. But the interview I had with him was about 2 hours. So it shows you that a large number of Somalis have also supported Al-Shabaab, not because of Al-Qaeda, but because they genuinely thought that they were defending their countries, and they genuinely thought they were fighting for Somalia and they were fighting against Ethiopia. And they will tell you that, and I'm sure not only Al-Shabaab, but many Somalis share this opinion, that the people who fought against Ethiopia, they will say to you, we showed Ethiopia that they can destroy our country and they can destroy our government, but they cannot control our country. And this was the idea that many people fought for. Many people who later on joined Al-Shabaab and became strong members of Al-Shabaab. Just to shorten the story, Asadiere was the first militant to attack the presidential palace in September 2009. I didn't know that he was going to attack the presidential palace, but he was a bodyguard for a minister. A minister was suspicious of him. He also was a bit lost because he was a young man who became a killing machine at a young age. He didn't know what to do. He was mentally very confused. He could not find a solution and sanctuary and solace being with the government. He didn't know what to do. So he got money from somebody. He left the country, he went to South Africa, he went to Djibouti, he went to Kenya. He didn't know. Every place he goes was a dead end. So he came back to Mogadishu and he tried to go back to the minister and to say that I really don't know where to go, I just want to work with you. But the minister knew that this young man left him and he doesn't know whether he went back to Al-Shabaab, so he cannot trust him. So he said, keep him outside. So he was kept outside, and I'm sure he had some psychological breakdown. So one day he hid in an AMISOM truck and he went inside Villa Somalia and with a gun, and a pistol and several hand grenades, and he carried out the first attack in the presidential palace. He was killed, but he was killed in an area between the president's office, the prime minister's office, and the minister's office. So I don't know whether he wanted to kill the president or the prime minister or the minister. Most of the people I spoke to said he wanted to kill the minister. So those are the two phases of Al-Shabaab. And I'm sure you have seen one week Al-Shabaab talking about global jihadism, fighting against the United States, going to Alaska. And the next day they are fighting against the Christian Crusaders, whether they are from Uganda or Ethiopia, who invaded Somalia and appealing to Somalis to help them. So I'm going to touch a little bit about Al-Shabaab and how it works. Al-Shabaab's ideology was laid out by former leader Ahmed Abdi Godani, who created the modern Al-Shabaab organization that we know. He created maybe 7 to 11 maktabis or departments or ministries. Al-Shabaab also has a Shura Council. Al-Shabaab is not a democratic organization. Al-Shabaab wants and drives its principles from, according to its leaders, from Quran and Sunnah, and use examples of Caliphate and previous Muslim governments of Osmani, Abbasiyin or Umayyayin, or the government of Prophet Muhammad, and they will tell you that principally Al-Shabaab, the way it runs is very effective, and when I say that, I don't mean I'm very much in love with the way government their own territory, but they will go and take over a small village, and that village will be people who first take over the village are the Jabha, the largest, I think maybe I should say, the largest number of, the largest military organ of Al-Shabaab are the Jabha. I believe they number about 5,000 to 6,000. They have mechanized brigades, they have technical vehicles, they have suicide bombers. Not all of them are in one place. When they want to attack some place, they bring people from all over the place, from all over the regions. Because of the security reasons, because of the US drones, they don't concentrate on one place. So if they want to attack some place, they will send their intelligence, they will collect some information, and then that information will be passed on to the commander of the Jabha. The commander of the Jabha will prepare a plan to attack, take over the town or a base. Then that will be passed on to the Amir and the leader of Al-Shabaab. Al-Shabaab is very much top to bottom organization. Everything works according to the Amir's wishes. So they will take over town, they will send, the Jabha will take over, then they will send a wali or a governor or a chairman or a district commissioner, whatever you call for the town, and immediately they will bring a Hisbah or the police, and the police will tell people what to do, how to observe Salat, close the shops, follow judgment from the courts. They will bring a charge. Initially they would Al-Shabaab would appoint judges from locals, but now they are more suspicious of local judges, so they appoint a very ideological judge who graduated from one of their schools or from one of their mosques. And the rest is history. We know that Al-Shabaab is collecting taxes not only from the areas that they control, but also the areas that the government controls. Al-Shabaab's other side is the Amniyat, who are in charge of killing whoever is not happy with the organization. They don't just spy on government, they also spy Al-Shabaab themselves to flash out spies. They protect high-profile individuals. That's the Amniyat. Amniyat themselves are very large in number. Most of the people in the newspapers, you might have seen people say Al-Shabaab is about 5,000 men. I don't think Al-Shabaab is 5,000. I think Al-Shabaab has more men than the government. And the reason for that is because Al-Shabaab has been recruiting since 2006. To give you one example, just 10 days ago, in one day, they recruited about 300 men in one small village. The number of battles that Al-Shabaab lost in men, we have seen one report by the United States last week that they carried out drone strike in central Somalia, killing 60 men. There were a couple of other drone strikes, one 2017, another one 2016. Maybe they killed 100 each attack. Before that, Al-Shabaab might have lost about a couple of hundred in the battle in Mogadishu. Apart from that, Al-Shabaab did not lose many men. So Al-Shabaab has been recruiting every year. I believe they have more men than the federal government. So I think the federal government should recognize that and not say Al-Shabaab is few people and we're gonna surround them. And Al-Shabaab has very strong militias. I also want to talk a little bit about, regardless of Al-Shabaab's achievements and capability in terms of carrying out attacks, Al-Shabaab has shown that it can carry out complex attacks, raid military bases, whether it's government or armed force. They carry out attacks in Mogadishu, in hotels, everywhere. They have attacked twice the British Palace, maybe 2 or 3 times the parliament. They have attacked so many ministries. So they have shown that they can be very destructive. What they have not shown is that they can convince every Somali to take their ideology. They have not convinced every Somali to come and support them. And they have not taken over throughout Somalia. And they are very much well short of Al-Qaeda's objectives and their own objectives. They do not control most of Somalia. They do not control people's thinking and the way of life. And with the presence of African Union troops, it's very unlikely that they will topple the government. So they have had some successes, but they're very much well short of their objectives. So I'm going to stop there.
Thank you very much, Harun. Harun, you started off incredibly modest, saying that you're not an academic. And I think maybe that is a huge service to this book in particular, because the way that it is written, the characters come alive. It's really interesting to learn about Afghan, about Godere, about these high-profile names that we've heard, so often about in the media. But they get a real life. So I think, and then you being able to, bear upon your decades of journalism and contacts and networks and materials is also a huge strength to this book. So I hope everyone will get an opportunity to read it. I had to resist the temptation to jump straight to the last chapter, which is the future of Al-Shabaab. We're very curious to get your opinions and thoughts more elaborated on that as well. And I'll have a question on that. But I'd like to open it up to you, the audience. I am not sure whether you've all had an opportunity to purchase the book. It's available on Amazon now. It's here in hard copy. But Al-Shabaab is not a new topic to any of us in the room. And this is the man to be speaking with if you have any thoughts and questions and comments. So what I'll propose is that we take a couple of rounds of questions. If I can invite everyone to be as brief as possible so that we can ensure that everyone gets an opportunity who wants to speak can do so. So let's start off, and we have got a microphone as well. And who's going to kick us off on this very interesting conversation? The microphone is right there, so let's start off with the gentleman over there. If you can briefly introduce yourself as well.
My name's Alistair Carr. I'm a SOAS postgrad doing a degree in violence, conflict and development. Thanks so much for coming to London. I'm really, really chuffed you're here. I was really excited that you were coming. I'm already halfway through the book. And reading that and hearing what you said last week, and it was one of the first things that you said after thanking the Hannah Ali, the facilitator, I think, was that we can talk to Al-Shabaab. And Hussein Sheikh Ali, the ex-National Security Advisor, recently wrote an article for The Guardian last week saying the same thing. So is that something that is, one, feasible, and then second, is that something that's preferable? Is that something that would lead to a desirable outcome, possibly? Thanks.
Thank you so much. I think that was very clear. Let's take, yes, we have a... So the microphone is not just ceremonial, I think.
And is why Shabaab is so active in the south or that part of Somalia, and it's not active in Somaliland or the Somali region in Ethiopia or in Djibouti, but it's so active in the south and also the region in Kenya.
First of all, aad baad u mahadsantahay that you wrote the book. Welcome to London. My question to you is, we have, as you mentioned in the book, a lot of young men that have been given amnesty or that have left Al-Shabaab. Now, Al-Shabaab is a terrorist organization, and we are trying to build a country. Should we allow anyone who more or less was involved in bloodshed, in causing pain, to represent the Somalia that we fought very, very hard to achieve?
Thank you. Brilliant. Good. We'll just pause and give Harun an opportunity to respond. Intaanad jawaabtaanad u gelin Harun, saad ogtihiin eventkan caawa af Ingiriisi buu ku baxayaa, laakiin waxaan aad u soo dhaweynayaa qofkii doonaya inuu af Soomaali su'aal ama fikir inuu ku soo kordhisto inuu isaguna soo jeediyo. Markaas raali baad naga ahaadaysid, af qalaad baan sanadkan eventkan aan ku soo jeedinaynaa, laakiin Soomaali baan wadan nahay, markaa please feel free to do that. Thank you.
So principally, there is no other way other than to talk to Al-Shabaab. The question is how. I'm not an expert on negotiations, but I think last week I also said it's not possible at this moment to talk to Al-Shabaab. Principally, I believe that Al-Shabaab, they're part of Somalia, and there are a lot of Somalis who are part of Al-Shabaab, and there are a lot of number of people, clans, who are with Al-Shabaab, not necessarily because of the ideology, but because they cannot see themselves in other systems, whether that's in the government or other regional administrations. I believe a lot of people use Al-Shabaab for their own political ends. So Al-Shabaab, the possibility is there, and I'll give you some examples. I don't think Al-Shabaab today will come immediately and say we're ready to talk with the government. But certain things has to happen that compels Al-Shabaab to talk. I don't think Al-Shabaab will open talks voluntarily with the government. I believe Al-Shabaab's strength and authority should be diminished massively before they can enter into talks. I say this because the only time that attacks by Al-Shabaab were reduced in Somalia is when they were under pressure, whether that's from the government or from AMISOM. When you pressure Al-Shabaab, not only Al-Shabaab, any human being, when you pressure them, they ask themselves questions, and they ask their leaders questions, why this is happening. Al-Shabaab at this moment, if you remember when Abu Mansour defected, Abu Mansour spoke and he said he defected, he disagreed with Al-Shabaab, and then a few days later, Ali Dere, the spokesman of Al-Shabaab, spoke. And one of the reasons he used to condemn Mukhtar Robo was Mukhtar Robo always wanted to talk with the apostates. And that's why he was not part of Al-Shabaab. I think he doesn't mean that message, he doesn't mean that statement personally, but it's a message he's sending to his militias and to the other officials within Al-Shabaab that they cannot just defect and enter talks with the government. He's saying if anybody's entering talks, Al-Shabaab is going to enter talks. I don't think Ali Dere is ready for talks now, but certain things has to happen. I believe the government's authority should be expanded, and I believe Al-Shabaab's capability in carrying out attacks against government and AMISOM should be massively reduced, and only then that we can enter talks with Al-Shabaab. Just give you one other example. Al-Shabaab is Amir al-Mu'minin, the leader of Al-Shabaab, the man Al-Shabaab respects and go back to for final consultation, is the leader of Taliban, who is the Amir of Mu'minin, as they recognize it. And the Taliban today is talking with the Americans, they're talking with the Afghan government. I believe if Al-Qaeda has at some point has disagreed with Al-Shabaab when it comes to the level of violence. Even Al-Qaeda has, I don't know whether they were sincere about that, but there were communications retrieved from Osama bin Laden's compound, which indicated that Osama bin Laden told Al-Shabaab really to differentiate in their level of attacks against civilians. Al-Shabaab was not listening, they're still not listening, but they still respect Al-Qaeda leaders, and they have some emotional connection with Al-Qaeda. We have seen that's why Al-Shabaab did not succumb to advances by ISIS when most of the Al-Shabaab fighters were mesmerized by ISIS brutality in Iraq and Syria. Al-Shabaab leadership resisted. That's not because they're not ideologically same as ISIS. They are absolutely same as ISIS. There's no difference between ISIS and Al-Shabaab. But that was because they have some affinity, they have some emotional connection with Al-Qaeda. And I believe their communication between Al-Shabaab and Al-Qaeda is very effective. It's not a yearly, it's not a, they stop that. But that's a different chapter in the book, how this new ISIS splinter group emerged. You can read that in the book. But to move on to the why Al-Shabaab is active in the south, that is, Al-Shabaab is going to be active wherever it finds and the opportunity to operate. Al-Shabaab tried to, if you remember, I think it was March 2016, they tried to send about 1,000 men to Puntland, and their intention was to take a large part of Puntland, but it backfired, and they lost most of their men. Al-Shabaab will be able and will not hesitate to operate wherever it can find sanctuary, or the conditions that allow Al-Shabaab to prosper, which are lawlessness, doubt and suspicion among the community, lack of trust in the government and the political system, public apathy, joblessness, desperation, a lot of people who who were looking for suffering, because Somalia have suffered for a long time, for almost 30 years. A lot of people have gone to mosques, a lot of people were trying to find, to reason their suffering. Why are we suffering? Why did Somalia suffer so much? And a lot of people went very close to Allah, which is exactly what people should do when they are in doubt about their life and where they're suffering. But Al-Shabaab exploited that vulnerability. So if Al-Shabaab gets the opportunity to operate in Somalia, I'm sure they will take that opportunity. After all, what their leaders say in public is that they want to create a caliphate, first in Somalia and then move on to the other regions. And that's, they operate in Kenya. The level of number of attacks they carry out in Kenya is as much as the number of attacks they carry out in Somalia now. We can talk about why they succeeded in Kenya compared to the others. That's a different subject, and I talk about that in the book. The other question was, should we allow people who shed our blood to be part of the process? I touched this question a little bit last week. Where should we draw the line? And we have to take into account how did we treat our warlords. the warlords are part of society, but there was a system that finally put them out of the system. It's a tough question. I believe the ordinary young Al-Shabaab fighters should be part of society and should have every future if they want to be part of society and if they renounce violence. The problem is that there is not much alternative when Al-Shabaab defect from Al-Shabaab on the government side. And I say this because we have seen number of rehabilitation centers. There are 3 rehabilitation centers in Mogadishu, Kismayo, and Baidoa, and so far they have rehabilitated about 700 people. Most of them went back into society. But those who are in the rehabilitation centers are those who are not working with the government. Several hundred people work with the government. They are in the intelligence. They are plain-clothed people. They are in the town and they're helping the government. Some do genuinely help the government, but some also undermine the security, and they have never disconnected relations with Al-Shabaab. They still feed Al-Shabaab with information. So Al-Shabaab find out about this defector program and they infiltrated. They sent some fake defectors into the rehabilitation centers to collect information about genuine defectors. To go back to your question, there are Al-Shabaab defectors who are holding high-profile positions in the government. They are officials. They are in the intelligence. They are in the military. So, if we have welcomed those, when I say we, I mean our government. If our government has welcomed those into the system, then why do we differentiate? That it's a question. It's not my preference, but it's the reality.
Sorry, just
think
following on that point.
You want to come back?
We have an issue that we didn't have reconciliation. Somalia is already fragmented. That we are states now. So, and if we're talking about Al-Shabaab, and we're talking about them as a homogenous group, a group that follows each other's leadership and it's from top to bottom, and that they have capabilities that we can't underestimate. If we're talking about numbers game, Somalia's population is 12 to 14 million people. We have many people in the States. We have diaspora sorry. I am quite passionate about this, and I am very much speaking as a mom. I would like my children to have a future that is intertwined with Somalia and my culture. But Al-Shabaab has no basis for whatever ideology. Somalis have always, believed in Islam. We are not a Salafist-based people. So for you to suggest that Al-Shabaab should be given power sharing, or they should be part of,
said power sharing.
this is what it could lead to, because there are articles now that are promoting this idea.
Okay, let me interrupt you. This question is for Somalia. It's not just for me. Somalis have to decide what they want.
Yes.
I told you it's not my preference.
Yes.
But Al-Shabaab defectors are part of the government. So where is the line? What's the standard for deciding who to put in the government and who not to put in the government? How do we decide? Do we consider clan? Do we consider geography? Do we consider the level of influence of the individual? What's the standard? It's the government who should do that. It should be, but there should be the anti-terrorism law has been before the parliament for years, 2-3 years. This should be part of the terrorism law. The government should define this. Nobody has defined it. If you're asking my personal view, I can share that with you.
Yes.
And my personal view is that there should be accountability, there should be truth and reconciliation.
Yeah.
People should admit the crimes and what they have did before the society. There should be consequences for what people did. That's my personal preference. But the reality is different.
No, yeah.
This man, is an academician and he's not the Somali government. He's here.
A journalist, yes.
Yeah, and he's a writer. So let us not, corner him and put him in a situation that's absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you. We'll continue with the round of questions, but the point about impunity is, of course, one that, and accountability is one that Somalia will continue to be faced with. A couple of interesting facts I'd like to highlight from the book, though, which Harun has mentioned here this evening as well. It's the sheer numbers of people that are associated, whichever rank, in Al-Shabaab. And the numbers, in your estimation, are much higher than what the figures are that are given. So what do you do with that? What do you do with territories that are basically hostages to Al-Shabaab and have no choice but to cooperate with them, of course, and are coerced into Al-Shabaab's ranks? What do you do with these innocent people? And what do you do with the question of the path of radicalization? You gave us the story of two people who are very different in their radicalization journey. One may seem to be, doomed, or may be subscribing to violent extremism as an ideology, as a core. The other one, you explained, had possibly other motivations. So there are a lot of complex issues to unwrap here, and I think the book does that, touches upon it and does that quite well. But moving on, a couple of questions, comments, thoughts, and if we can keep it as brief as possible, then we can also ensure that our discussions are continue for as long as possible and involve everyone. So I'm just going to start off with our host, Laura, first, and then I'll come to you. Thank you.
Thanks, Harun. I wondered if you could say, you said that Al-Shabaab is organized in a very top-down manner, yet I'm thinking about what the lived experience of being in a community that's under Al-Shabaab control. What does that look like and feel like? And it seems that at least at certain points in time, Al-Shabaab at the local level has had really quite different characteristics depending on what their interaction was with local leadership. So if they were generally welcomed, then they had a bit more autonomy, but there seem to have been cases where they had to negotiate for power and sort of modify their approaches in some ways in order to have a foothold. And could you say something about whether you think that that's still the case at the local level? Is there a variety of different experiences in a sense? Because that also feeds into the question of why do people support Al-Shabaab? Why are those numbers so large?
Thank you very much, Harun. When we hear about Al-Shabaab, we don't often hear the role of women, and we know some of them, major of them are victims, but major role for Al-Shabaab relies on women is fundraising. There was a lady called Amina and Hawa in Minnesota who were convicted for fundraising for Al-Shabaab. So have you interviewed any women or are they part of the process when you were writing the book? And also, what role do they have apart than fundraising, cooking, or looking after Al-Shabaab? That's my question. Thank you.
Thank you so much. That's very clear. And I will go to the lady over there.
Thank you. My question is, Al-Shabaab has huge support within the society. They cannot exist without the support of the society. Not all of the society, but in general. And do you think on a personal level that those people who support them, I mean within their families, within their families, because they mostly know, I mean the mothers and fathers and brothers, they know. Should they be punished as well for not telling on their sons what they are doing and or their daughters, or should there be a law which punishes those who know and not tell as well, or can they go free?
Thank you so much. The culture of silence. We'll take one more question. The young lady over there, and then I'll wrap up this, give Harun an opportunity to briefly respond and come back to you again.
Harun, I just want to say I'm a big fan of yours. I think you're a great journalist in terms of Somali journalists in the diaspora. A lot of them failed to keep their politics out of their writing, and you do that very greatly. So I want to say kudos for that. My question is in regards to the role that the change in Somali governments has had on, I guess, the rise of Al-Shabaab. Touching on the immunity part, as you know, when Farmajo came into power, he put out a 30-day disclaimer that anyone that defects within 30 days kind of would not get charged and they'll be all good. Mukhtar Robo, I think like 9-10 months after that, defected, and that defecting is still ongoing a year and a half later. What wrongdoings do you think that the government has failed, I guess, to be held accountable for? And I guess how can we hold them accountable for failing to do so?
You mean the government?
Yes, the government.
I mean, as you rightly said, the government has renewed amnesty for Al-Shabaab. The amnesty is still open. I think it's an open-ended amnesty. But I talk a little bit about the deficiencies within the defector rehabilitation program. The reason you need a very effective rehabilitation program is because the level of training and mentoring and brainwashing that Al-Shabaab fighters go through. Al-Shabaab has, they train them not only for military, but they also train them for resilience, they train them for endurance, they train them mentally, they prepare them psychologically until the young man is ready to die. For instance, they have a pool of suicide bombers, and there are quite large number of them. And it's not like Al-Shabaab leaders go to suicide bombers and say, today is your turn, come and blow yourself. It's not like that. They say, who is going to volunteer? And there are several hundred people who are raising their hands, who are saying, it's me, and they're competing. And whoever is elected or chosen to be the suicide bomber is taken to a separate house for a while, given special knowledge and special funds just to keep him busy, separated from the rest of the group. That's their level of motivation. So you have to deprogram that. And you really have to have a very sophisticated program equal to that in order to radicalize this young man. That's not happening today. So it's up to the Al-Shabaab defector whether he likes being with the government, whether he has very strong parents who can take him away from being in that field. Because we know a number of them have returned to Al-Shabaab. Few of them were killed after their return, but some people returned to Al-Shabaab. So there's something wrong with the amnesty program, and there's something wrong with the de-radicalization program. I don't know what the government could do is, if you really talk to the young people, there are certain scholars they like and listen to. Al-Shabaab, when they are mentally preparing them, they don't just give them lectures. They show them videos, they show them lectures, and expose them to people that they respect when it comes to religion, theologians, high-profile scholars. And there are high-profile scholars well known by many people in Somalia who are still with Al-Shabaab. These were people who were established scholars even when Siad Barre was in the country. And there are a large number of them. They are in the country, they are outside the country. So the government needs to have that level of commitment from the scholars, whoever they might be, in order to radicalize them. I believe Mukhtar Rebo would be a very good candidate for radicalization. But is the government using him for that purpose? I believe the best people we could use today are the scholars who defected from Al-Shabaab to radicalize them, because they know where they're coming from. The reason that many people, I said earlier that majority of Somalis do not support Al-Shabaab. That's true. Majority of Somalis do not buy into that ideology. But still some people support Al-Shabaab for a variety of reasons. Some people support Al-Shabaab just because of fear, and they don't have a choice. And we have seen the government take over towns. And when the towns are taken over, immediately some people come forward to work with the government. They work with the soldiers and AMISOM, but then after a few weeks, they vacate the town. Al-Shabaab comes in, beheads those who cooperated with the government and AMISOM. So when you have that kind of approach, not many people are going to come forward to work and collaborate with the government again, even in the areas that the government controls. In Mogadishu, there are a number of defectors who work with the National Intelligence Agency as informers. But how do you convince ordinary people in Mogadishu to report suicide bombings or vehicle-borne suicide bombers? The president has said that he's going to give 100,000 to anybody who reports a suicide bombing vehicle. I don't think one person has ever been given that award. I have asked the president's office, has anybody been awarded? Did anybody came forward to claim this bounty? And nobody has given me a yes that anybody has been awarded. But the Somali Intelligence Agency, somehow they get some information. They don't get all the information, but they have not, the whole agency is not corrupt. There are some very good officers, and the agency gets some information. They get some information beforehand, before something happens. But they lack the capacity, the training, the knowledge, and the mechanism to confront. But I can assure you that there's some very well prepared officers who are with the agency, and they get a lot of information. And but they don't have the support all the time from the public. But it's about the mindset. We have to change the mindset of the people so that they work with the government. There has to be a mechanism that convinces people to come forward and report this kind of incident. And the role of women, Al-Shabaab naturally do not involve women in fighting. But there were cases where Al-Shabaab used a female in suicide bombing. In the case of the Somali theater, National Theater, and the killing of former Interior and Security Minister. In these two incidents, female attackers executed the attack. But generally, they are not part of Al-Shabaab military women, but it's being established by the National Intelligence Agency that a good number of women work with Al-Shabaab in terms of information gathering in Mogadishu and in other towns. Not only information gathering, but also in transporting logistics, taking weapons, explosives from one place to another because they would attract less suspicion. That has been recorded by the National Intelligence Service. But generally, Al-Shabaab do not involve in battlefronts or in decision making. They do not involve women. I don't know if I answered all the questions, but
Thank you very much, Harun. Let's move on to a few more questions. We'll start off with Chama.
Harun, you mentioned it quickly that Al-Shabaab kills also inside. And I was wondering about the assassination at the top level of Al-Shabaab that happened, like the death of Godane, how it worked, if we know more details about what have been said.
how Godane was killed or how Godane killed his opponents?
Or the same, both sides, how the assassination is at the top level worked, which was... seemed interesting.
Okay.
Thank you. Yeah.
I'm from Djibouti. My English is very bad, so I will ask my question in Somali. Su-aashaan weydiinayay waxa weeye in si dulduulan maqlayay in introductionkaagii kolkaa laga yaabaa inaad soo hadal qaaday haddaad soo hadal qaaday waad iga raalli ahaan doontaa haddii kalena su-aasha iga guddoon al-shabaab iyo qabyaalad in soomaaliya qabyaalad halkay kala taagan yihiin waa la ogyahay ma la odhan karaa al-shabaab ideology unbaa hagta oo iyo kuway ka bad qabaan in saami qaybsi dan soomaalida waa shay power sharing soomaalida waa shay iyo kale ma laga dhex maqlaa siday wax u qaybsadaan xukunka iyo ama powerka siday u qaybsadaan su-aashaasaan doonaya.
Thank you very much. That question, for the benefit of our non-Somali speaking members of the audience, basically what is the role of tribe in Al-Shabaab, knowing the importance of tribal affiliation in the broader Somali society? And secondly, is there any form of power sharing arrangements within Al-Shabaab structures that reflect also societal divisions? Yeah. Yes, gentleman over there.
Hi, Harun. A question for you about international military involvement in Somalia. Whether it seems that the Trump administration has stepped up U.S. drone strikes, for instance, targeting Al-Shabaab. I'm wondering if those, in your reporting, show to have any effect on Al-Shabaab's operational capacity, or even on their spirit or on their recruitment. And the same, basically, I'm wondering about the future of AMISOM's involvement in Somalia. There seems to be a question about how much longer they are going to sustain their mission. Thanks.
Thanks. So my question is a follow-up to the lady over there who was asking about the influence of family members on Al-Shabaab, and also the other one on the tribal influences. So in the book, you talk about some of the leaders, especially Mukhtar, I think his name is... Yes, and how sometimes he felt that some of his clan members were influencing him. And also Ahmed Abdi Godane, because he's from Somaliland, you know, you said that he feels less pressure from his clans. So what I'm asking is, especially with Ahmed Godane, do you know if he had any connections with his family? And if so, have they had any influence on him? Thank you.
Fantastic. Let's give Harun an opportunity to quickly respond to that, and then we'll aim for a very quick round afterwards.
Okay. Godane, how Godane was killed is in the book. It's very detailed way, but it's United States infiltrated Al-Shabaab. I'm sure you're very well aware of that. Even today, they carried out an airstrike, and they said they killed 2 men. So that level of infiltration is not something I'm personally aware of, but I think they're probably using some of the insiders, people who know Al-Shabaab leaders, who know their movement. And I talk about chapter of the book, the hunt of Al-Shabaab leaders, and it's not only the United States, but the Somali intelligence service has been working massively with the United States in identifying these individuals, and the United States has used very sophisticated equipment, whether it's a listening device or whether it's drones or whether it's other systems to follow Al-Shabaab individuals. I believe generally that they know probably the movement of every Al-Shabaab leader in the United States. The question we ask many times ourselves is, if they know their whereabouts, why don't they bomb them? And the answer to that is maybe they're looking for more, maybe they're looking for information. Sometimes information may be more valuable than individual. But in this case, Godane, he came to Parawe, but he was being tracked by it's very detailed in the book. It's being tracked by about 40 people, including Somali intelligence officers. And Godane also knew the dangers. He would not carry a lot of mobile phones. He would not switch on his mobile phone. Most of the time he would change his bodyguards. He was very security-minded person, but I think the United States put everything they had on him, and they located him one evening, and they bombed it. The Godane assassinated a number of individuals, including Afghani, the mentor, the gentleman I was talking about earlier at the opening of my statement. He was executed by Godane. They had, I don't think they had ideological differences. They had different opinions on how to govern the organization. Godane was going a little bit far ahead. He was saying he should be treated like Amir al-Mu'minin, and he was not listening so much of Al-Qaeda. Afghan was very much connected to Al-Qaeda, but also it's about power, it's about influence. At some point they had a meeting and they agreed to change Godane, and they have appointed a special committee, arbitrate committee, to mediate between Afghan and Godane. I obtained the copies, the letters that they have written, this committee, in order to mediate between them, and they were asking each one of them to do certain things. So they told Godane that he has about 6 months to hold the position, and then they will elect a new leader. This is 2011, June. That's when they made the decision. But Godane had other ideas. Initially, he accepted the formation of the arbitration committee, but when they issued this statement, he did not immediately reject, but they would say, Godane never say, he doesn't say, I accept it or did not accept it, but he will say, we'll think about it, and then he will continue his operation. But finally he rejected, and they were not satisfied with it. They complained it to Al-Qaeda, that's Ibrahim Afghan and others. They kept on writing letters to Al-Qaeda, but one thing that Godane was given in that mediation in 2006 was that he should be the only one who contacts Al-Qaeda. So they went behind his back and they contacted Al-Qaeda, but they also criticized him in public, and also there were a lot of social media criticism of Godane and his leadership by people within the group who were using fake names. They were on Twitter, they were on social media, and they were making all kinds of allegations against him. Then he thought the best way was, and there was a process that he followed. He asked a number of leaders who are very ideologically closer to him about what to do. If they can issue fatwa, they issued fatwa, and then finally he got rid of them. Al-Shabaab and Qabiyalat. Al-Shabaab and clanism. Al-Shabaab is not against clans. Godane and Al-Shabaab leaders, they do not shy away from clans. They actually praise clans who come to support Al-Shabaab, in the same way that Prophet Muhammad praised clans who supported him. And they take that as an example. And I don't want to repeat what they said, but they mentioned a number of clans who came before the others to support Al-Shabaab. And they said X, Y, Z, B, J came first ahead of the rest, and they are closer to the khair and good and jihad, and so they do not shy away. They use clan to their advantage. They don't allow clanism and discrimination based on clans, but they use clan to their advantage. They collect clan elders from Mogadishu and other towns. Ironically, Mogadishu, some of the elders who participate in government conferences were taken out of Mogadishu to a conference outside Mogadishu. They attended conferences with Al-Shabaab, and they were given instructions to donate 100 men in certain days, 300 men, collect money from businesses. They identify people who are collecting money through clan connections. They call somebody and businessman, rich businessman, they say, today you're going to pay $200,000. And the businessman say, how do I know it's you? How do I know it's Al-Shabaab? So they hang up the phone and they say, somebody's going to call you in 2 minutes. So who calls him? His clan elder or somebody who is from his family. And he says, the people who called you are genuine. The Al-Shabaab, you have to deal with them. So they use clanism to their advantage. There was a time that when ISIS was emerging, a lot of people would know that Al-Ittihad was divided. Al-Ittihad is the parent organization of Al-Shabaab, but it was an organization that's also known for friction between clans. Members of Al-Ittihad had clan frictions. So I don't know why I skipped it from my mind, but yeah, there was a time that when ISIS was coming out, was emerging, they wanted to use not only ISIS and ISIS ideology, and because of ISIS announced caliphate, and caliphate is everything that Al-Shabaab wanted. So what's the problem? And Al-Shabaab is not that different from ISIS. So they wanted to use something else in order to get more support against Al-Shabaab. So one thing they used it was, Godani is from Somaliland, he's killing the southerners, so let's fight against him. And some of the ISIS members tried to play that card, but it didn't work. And but if they can use clanism, they try to use it. They try to use it to their own advantage. That's my point. There is no. I mean, the interesting thing is that the wali or the governor of Lower Juba region is from central regions, and the governor of Hiran region is from Gada region. The governor of Lower Shabelle region is from Juba, Lower Juba region. I can name the clans. The governor of Middle Shabelle is from Middle Shabelle. The governor of Galgudud is from Galgudud. The governor of Al-Shabaab faction in Puntland is from Somaliland. I mean, but I don't think they have a problem when it comes to, I don't think they use power sharing. If they use power sharing, the one man who wanted to replace Godane was Mahat Karatai. He was his deputy for a long time. He always wanted to replace him. He fought for him. He was he's head of Amniyat, he's head of defense. There's nobody more convenient than him. But eventually they appointed somebody who was closer to Godane, and he got on with it. And they recruit a lot of people according to clan lines, and they ask clans to donate certain number of boys. I mentioned 300 people in Lower Shabelle was donated by the clans in Lower Shabelle. Some clans in central Somalia and in Shabelle, Middle Shabelle region, in Hiran region, they tried to fight against this because Al-Shabaab was collecting a lot of money, a lot of boys, even young boys from them. So finally they took up arms, and you have seen those stories being covered by the media in the past few weeks.
Thank you very much. Harun, before we close, we're coming to the end of the time that has been allocated to us. And then we'll move on to a book signing. So I'll invite everyone also to stay and get a copy of the book. Looking to the future, if I can, in 2 minutes, ask your thoughts on the future. The security situation today, at least the book touches upon particularly 2017, where it describes a very difficult security situation which has been used to Al-Shabaab's advantage. We're entering 2019, 1 year before elections are due to take place in Somalia. The federal member states have this week issued a communique where they're saying that they are setting up their own unified soldiers, army to fight against terrorism due to inefficiencies at the federal level. So there's a lot of friction between the federal member states and the federal government, although a lot of progress has also been made. Still a very complicated situation. So where does that place Al-Shabaab in 2018? What can we expect in 2019? And I think it also relates to the last question, which was about AMISOM's effectiveness.
Yes.
So your thoughts on that.
Okay.
And then, inshallah, what does the future hold for Harun Maruf? Is there a second book coming?
The future is very simple.
Although we love to have you on the air, this book has been incredibly valuable, and I hope it's not the end of your writing. And there's certainly a lot to write about, and so many other topics that you have talked about. So, can we expect another book? What is happening?
Thank you very much. Sorry, Gabe Jeslow is my former colleague. He was a former VOA East Africa bureau chief. Maybe that's why I forgot his question. AMISOM has done a lot of work in protecting the government. The government would have collapsed without AMISOM. They have absolutely done a lot of work in protecting the government. Do they have enough troops to expand the authority of the government to every part of Somalia? The question is no. Al-Shabaab has found a way to attack AMISOM forward operating bases. Al-Shabaab has devised that plan, and they have had a number of successes, killing more than 100 Kenyan troops in El-Adde, killing about 53 in Lego, killing about 19 in Janale. Ugandans killing about, they have also attacked Ethiopians. The only country they did not attack is Djibouti, and I hope they don't attack. The international presence in Somalia has helped the government enormously. They would not have existed without the government. The airstrikes have had some impact in Al-Shabaab, in killing some key individuals. And recently, the United States has been targeting mid-level Al-Shabaab officials. Those are the people who make bombs, technicians, people who make large bombs. They have also been targeting vehicles that are coming to Mogadishu, possibly carrying large explosions. So they had some impact. The problem is that you need a very robust policy on the ground to complement what's happening from air, and we lack that. But they have had some impact going forward. I think AMISOM wants to give the government as much time as possible as it can build its own force. President Farmajo promised that within 2 years he's going to build a force that takes over responsibility for AMISOM. We don't have that yet, but it all comes down to vision. What's the vision of the government in reforming the security in terms of making instructions and vision for the country where everybody can catch up, will find themselves and feel that the government and the system reflects them. That's a political will. It depends on the Somali political leaders. When it comes to the future of Al-Shabaab, I believe Al-Shabaab is part of the problem. They're not going away very quickly. It's part of a complex problem. You need to solve one at a time. Historically, Somali militants, they have had a number of setbacks. Al-Qaeda, Al-Ittihad had a number of setbacks. There were times they were destroyed by warlords. At that time, they were destroyed by Ethiopia, and then Ethiopia again a number of times. each time they were put down, they came back. Even if Al-Shabaab are put down, there's a possibility that they will come back. So it depends on government and system and people of Somalis how they wanted to stabilize their country. But Al-Shabaab is there and it's part of the problem, and it needs very radical change. Not what we see, it needs very radical change, very substantial mindset within the society, within the government, in order to confront it, because they are determined, and you need a determined government to face that and to force them to come to the table.
Fantastic. Harun, thank you very much. We collectively congratulate you on this fantastic book. And also thank you for being with us and launching the book in London here for the first time. You are all very lucky to be getting a copy, and so please come forward if you're interested. It's cash only, and Harun will be able to place a signature on your book as well. So, but please thank me, join me in thanking Harun again for his time. Thank you. Good.